Hello there, it's the start of a new week. You're watching The Pulse on the Joy News channel. This afternoon, we bring you part 2 in a latest of our series on the Hotline documentary, A Nation That Begs. We tell you how Ghana moved from being a hero to zero less than 10 years after becoming a trailblazer in the Eurobond market. It's all coming up here on The Pulse. We also get to hear from Deputy Finance Minister Mona Quartey on her thoughts as far as the assurances from government is coming through that the economic recovery program is on track. Also coming up in this package, candidates continue to file nominations for the New Patriotic Party's flag bearership contest between 10 individuals. We're live at the headquarters of the New Patriotic Party with all the updates. Plus find out why one of them was turned away today. That's all coming up, and also we're looking at the floods of trauma. A special report on the issue of perennial flooding here in the capital, Accra.
Another big problem is that of poor drainage in our towns and cities, which leads to flooding during the rainy season. It is time to deal with these long-term problems and find long-lasting solutions, and we're doing just that.
We talk about the floods and more here on The Pulse. Be my guest. Joy News is independent, fearless and credible. I'm blessed to we are back in a jiffy. Please stay. Well, this afternoon, the economy is already back on track just months after Ghana secured the IMF bailout. That's according to the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, who's signaled there's a hope on the horizon. This afternoon, we put that to scrutiny and also hear from former Deputy Finance Minister Mona Quartey. But first, though, an insight into the country's insatiable appetite and, of course, the leaning towards borrowing, as it's been the case. We've titled, of course, our new series on the Hotline documentary, A Nation That Begs, and in the following excerpts from the documentary, which airs later this evening in terms of part 2, on the Joy News channel, data analyst Kofi Ejay walks us through how Ghana moved from hero to zero on the Eurobond market, where the nation found itself pleading for debt relief in both domestic and on the international capital markets. Here are excerpts.
As foreign liquidity began to dry up, exposing the weakness in Ghana's economic fundamentals, the only option was for Ghana to turn to the IMF for a bailout package. Professor Bokpin sounded the alarm bells. He said going to the IMF was inescapable.
I personally don't think that the IMF is a long-term solution to our problems. And the reason I say so is that we've been there 16, 17 times. Is that okay? And practically every 3 years and some few months, we've had to go to the IMF and all of that. But as we always say, what takes us to the IMF has to do with the fundamentals. And as we sit right now, everything points to that.
The calls to register for an IMF bailout became intense.
After seeing Article 4, after seeing the COVID report, Article 4 2019 and the COVID report, and seeing the fiscal gap which is there, that was when I expressed the view that maybe it's time for us to go, that's how far back, to go to the fund, because it's not just about COVID. But we got all the COVID money, as I said already, and we could have used it to make a correction, because the COVID money we got for ECF was 913 or so, million US dollars. Here you're talking about 6 billion. Why was it not sufficient to do the correction? Something fundamentally wrong.
Government's position was very simple. No IMF program. It has so much hope in using domestic means to turn the nation's economic fortunes around.
We are not going to the IMF. Whatever we do, we are not. The consequences are dire. We are a proud nation. We have the resources. We have the capacity. Don't let anybody tell you.
In the raging storm, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta was insistent that government wouldn't subscribe to an IMF program.
If because of political pride and the rest of them we don't want to go, that is a different thing altogether. It should not be our first resort. But we have not demonstrated that on our own we'll be able to impose a fiscal consolidation that would elicit the appropriate response from duty bearers, as perhaps we have seen in our relationship with the fund. If we could do that, why not? For 60-something years of independence, we can't keep going to the IMF. Anytime we go to the IMF, I feel that I feel we've lost something, right, as a sovereign country and the rest of them. But IMF doesn't impose itself on any country. Through countries' own actions and inactions, mismanagement of the economy and the rest of them takes them to the IMF. So if we arrive at that point where homegrown solution has probably failed to get at the same result, we'll do that. I believe that in 2014, when the government made a call to the IMF, it wasn't because it was their first resort, right? Yeah, the fundamentals dictate so.
My position has always been, once the government, on our behalf, whether I like it or not, says we are not going to the IMF, then my position changed. Then show as an alternative.
IMF cannot save us, right? Because we've done IMF 16 times, getting to 17 times now. We were on an IMF program for the best part of this government until recently, right? Up to the end of 2018, this government was on an IMF program. The good thing, though, in that respect, is that it does show that being an IMF program imposes more discipline. Because this government itself argues that all the way until early 2019, they were doing brilliant. What that means is that they were doing brilliant during the IMF program. That's an important point. So to make the case as if IMF is a problem is strange. If you did IMF from 2017 all the way to end of December 2018, and the economy was doing well as per your own analysis, then what is the argument anymore about IMF being a poison or a toxic element that you need to avoid? The government's attitude tends to be that, oh, we don't need IMF because IMF is bad. In a way, they don't say it directly, but it implies that it's bad. And I'm arguing that from 2017 January, when they came into power, to 2018 December, that's 2 years, they were running an IMF program. Now, when you ask them about their financial track record and their performance, the government likes to say that, oh, until COVID hit, we were doing brilliant. And I'm saying that if that track record is one you are so proud of, you did that under an IMF program.
Despite government's insistence, the honorary vice president of Imani Africa, Bright Simmons, was hopeful government's best bet was seeking an IMF support. But beyond the political ego, was there any historical experience preventing government from approaching the IMF for liquidity support?
During 2018, when you were under an IMF program, you were growing at 8.3%, right? You were doing fantastically well on inflation. Exchange rate was stable, right? We did not see massive unemployment based on some IMF restrictions or whatever it is that you've been calling it. You did the IMF program for 2 years. We know these are some of the reasons why you don't like the IMF. In April 2018, the government was forced to acknowledge that it lied to the IMF about its external arrears and was forced to apologize, right? You have to write to the managing director of the IMF and apologize that somehow you forgot whatever, some data was not there, blah, blah, blah. Of course, that is why you don't like the IMF, because that extra discipline, that extra scrutiny may not be something that is to your liking, but we have to look beyond your ego and think about a country. Yes, the IMF will insist that you disclose the data. You will not be able to play the games that you play with us here, where you say something, where is the data, you refuse to disclose the data. They will insist. So that might not be very pleasant for managers in the government, but that does not mean that it's against the national interest. We should distinguish between IMF program elements that may not benefit Ghana, of which nowadays there are not that many because you yourself have to come up with a proposal and you yourself have to negotiate it. And then IMF program elements that may not benefit the government, ministers and officials that may be responsible for designing and implementing it. I think the two are not on the same scale. And while the IMF will not transform Ghana, while the IMF will not change Ghana's fortunes dramatically, our argument is that it's no worse from the things that's already happening.
Well, so that's what you should be expecting later tonight when the full documentary, The Nation That Begs, is at exactly 8:30 p.m. here on the Joy News channel and available on all of our social media platform. Joining us for a conversation on this, we have Isaac Ofieje himself, who produced that documentary. We're also fortunate to have the former Deputy Finance Minister, Mona Kotey, joining us. Hello. Thank you for spending some time with us. Let's start off with Isaac, who's here with us, because Isaac, you've been looking at the data. The finance minister has also been speaking about this whole IMF conditionality and the program itself. So walk us through some of the key items the finance minister is pointing to, and let's situate that in this very documentary that you've put together.
Right, so the finance minister's message was very simple, that even with this 3 billion IMF bailout program that we are running, it's supposed to support government-owned domestic program. So what they call the PCPEG, the Post-COVID Economic Recovery Program. And if you look at what the finance minister has been saying, it simply tells you that if you look at the debt restructuring that we did both at the domestic and external, we are still in talks with our creditors. But if you look at the domestic level, we said, bingo, it was successful at 85%. But per what we are reading from the finance minister's statement and his engagement with the media yesterday, you can have a sense or a feeling that government will still go ahead to engage other creditors in the domestic space.
So a second debt restructuring may take place
maybe
in the coming days.
They will not term it that way,
right.
But if you've already said something is successful and you're coming back to engage other people,
right,
then we probably will term it as a second debt restructuring, whatsoever they would want to call it. Right. But as we speak, government wants to go to the negotiation table with some groups. First one is organized labor. Why? Because organized labor in the first exchange program, they were given complete exemption. Now government is saying, come back to the negotiation table for fresh stocks. This is supposed to help government to attain that 55% debt to GDP ratio they want to achieve in the medium term. They feel if organized labor is not on board, it will be so difficult to reach this. IPPs have been also asked to come back to the negotiation table for fresh stocks. Why? Because if you look at external creditors who came to invest about 1.6 billion in our economy, we actually restructured those external people debt as part of the domestic bonds. And you are looking at Eurobond markets. The debt that we owe the Eurobond markets are mostly pension funds. So if you are going there to restructure pension funds in the Eurobond market, then you must start.
And in fact, what's more striking to me is the fact that we may have to go back to this topic about the pension bond holders because it's not out yet. They're not out of the woods.
They are not. But, you were given complete exemption and now you are being asked to come back. I spoke to Abraham Kumsin, the Federation Secretary, and he says that government really wanted to do this in April, but because of the May Day celebration and all that, they couldn't go to the table for fresh stocks. Government surely will place the call, and they are certain that when government plays the call, they are going to suffer.
Isaac, we'll talk about what's likely to happen tonight when we watch The Nation That Begs, but I want to bring in Mona Kotey, who's also been listening into the conversation. Honourable, first of all, your thoughts on this fear that we may have to do a second round of internal or domestic debt restructuring. Are you, first of all, surprised about the development?
Thank you very much, Blessed. Good afternoon to yourself and to your listeners. No, I'm not surprised at what Isaac has just referred to. I'd like to just put our conversation in context. So we know that last week the IMF staff were here and they had a lot of conversations with the members of the Ministry of Staff and government. And their assessment, as they said, pointed to some positive signs of stability with, as we all know, some tailwinds that have come from natural resource prices going in the right direction. We've seen Brent crude and WTI prices, oil prices, stay below $80 per barrel. We've seen gold price do very well, closer to $2,000 than $1,900 per ounce. So in terms of receipts on natural resource, we continue to do well. We've seen fuel prices go down. We also saw the front loading of some of the conditions that the IMF had asked government to make, especially in the area of tax reform. So we saw new taxes kick in terms of revenue administration, again, which was another strong area. We saw work on that begin. And we've started to see, for example, property rates being actively collected by GRA, or let me even say at least bills going out. So we'll see how the collection also goes. So we are seeing new tax policies, as we've said. In terms of the foreign debt restructuring, I'm not even quite sure if that is completely concluded. Maybe Isaac can speak to that. But from what I gather, it is close to conclusion, but not totally concluded. And that gives assurance to the IMF to give us, as it were, the drugs that we need to stay in intensive care. Then on the domestic front, which you asked me about now, I believe that negotiations are still ongoing. I don't know that we are close to the end of that at all, because what is on the table now still does not sound like what pensioners especially will accept and what labor will accept. So I believe that that is still work in progress. And in as much as the government is caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, they will have to make some compromises. They cannot continue to dip into a market and then make bondholders and bill holders unhappy. I mean, we've talked about treasury bills that went on auction recently, and we saw that we now have an inverted curve where the shorter dated bills have a much higher interest rate than the longer dated bonds. That is a signal to government that they need to do much better. They cannot continue to talk about haircuts and on interest and even change of maturity. You know, that kind of credibility is gone between an issuer and an issuee. So that has to be resolved. Therefore, I believe that there are still issues to do with debt service sustainability, which for the IMF is a big issue. And also for those of us who hold treasury bills and bonds is an issue if you want to just...
In fact, the target that government set for itself was short of the IMF expectations. We're hovering somewhere around 97 billion, Isaac, correct? 97 billion. That's what we're working with. But it's now... It's now clear that we're nowhere close to that. I mean, first of all, what does this point to for you? For some, and the experts have raised the issue about transparency on the part of government in terms of reporting economic figures. That is also beginning to come up in this whole conversation.
So, Blessed, first of all, what I'd like to say is that, I mean, for those of us who've been in those offices before, we knew that it was time to go to the IMF. And that is because we were in a rabbit hole and we needed to dig ourselves out of that hole. We've been in that hole several times. So this will be the 17th time, that we found ourselves in this rabbit hole as a nation, because we have problems with our fundamentals, our fundamental economic structure. We have problems with that. So with all that has gone on and the unfortunate reckless management of our economy over the last 5 or so years, we are now in a rabbit hole that we are finding very difficult to even come to the zero mark, to the top. And the IMF has told us upfront what we need to do. We are struggling to do it and to get there. Yet I continue to hear the economic management team and the Ministry of Finance team, including the minister himself, praising themselves and saying they've done well. I'm not sure what it is that they've done well. It's work in progress. And we are all praying for them that they will be able to get to that zero level where the IMF is planning to take them over the next 3 years, get to that zero level so that as a nation, we can look forward to a bright future, bright golden future. So at this point, really, they'd still have some conditionalities to meet in order to get the other tranches of the 3 billion that they're expecting. You know, we already got 600 million.
Right.
There are other tranches that are yet to come, and there are still milestones to be met in order to get it. So there is a lot of work to be done, and I don't think it's time to pat ourselves on the back at the moment. This is the time to work hard to get to the zero level. Once we are at the zero level, we can start looking at planning for what is next. In fact, we should have planned for that already. What is next? What does Ghana need next? So my direct answer to you, Blessed, is that there is a lot of work ahead of us. until we get the liquidity that we need, the total 3 billion. And remember, it's a loan that has to be repaid. And the IMF is making sure that by the time we get to that zero level, we are able to repay that loan and any other loans that we would have taken out. So it's not free money at all.
In fact,
getting us to the
in fact, the finance minister points to some 6.2 billion that we're expecting from our international partners. We'll talk about that in detail. While at that, the president has also been speaking this morning. He's rather taking on the international ratings agencies. I just want us to listen to him briefly, and then we open up that leg of the conversation.
And I can comfortably and convincingly say this. As the AU champion for African financial institutions and leader of a country which recently had to deal with one of the most difficult periods in its post-independent history, difficulties which were exacerbated by the reckless behavior of rating agencies that engaged in pro-cyclical downgrades, shutting Ghana out of capital markets and turning a liquidity crisis into a solvency crisis. Afri-Exim Bank, under its counter-cyclical response mechanism, provided timely support to help Ghana navigate the macroeconomic management challenges, worsened by Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, in an orderly manner, when suddenly we realized we were alone. The country which had become, quote, the favorite child of bondholders and had successfully gone to market at the height of the pre-COVID-19 downturn was suddenly shut out of international capital markets. It is often said that you know who is truly your friend when you are in trouble, and is rightly stated by Dr. Martin Luther King in that often cited quote, "In the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends," unquote. When you're dealing with powerful international financial institutions, it is important to have your own powerful financial institution. And it is so important and significant that I'm here today, just a few months after that liquidity crisis, hosting the 30th anniversary celebration of Afri-Exim Bank. What I have just said about the great relationship between Afri-Exim Bank and Ghana, most of my colleagues in this room and across the continent and the Caribbean could say the same thing.
Well, so that's President Akufo-Addo speaking at the annual meetings of the Afri-Exim Bank, which is underway here in Accra. In fact, I was in that hall when the president was making that statement, and I'm just wondering why the president will decide to go on a warpath with the international ratings agencies. And in fact, we'll take the thoughts of Monakoti shortly. But Isaac, help us with the trend. Since 2022, we've seen that downward trend. The international ratings agency not being too favorable with a country that used to be the poster boy, if you want to call it that way.
In the Eurobond markets. I'm actually surprised because in 2021, when we became the trailblazers in the Eurobond market.
And I love the description from the president, by
the darling boys.
Yes.
It was these same ratings agencies that gave us those positive outlook, and that all the creditors wanted to lend to us, even at 0%. And so if at this point we are in a different situation, and they are using those same methodologies and they are giving us downgrades because of what is happening, I simply don't understand why the president has a problem with the ratings agencies. But maybe he has his own data, he has his own facts.
Well, for instance, let's take a look at, is it Fitch, for instance?
Fitch, yeah.
I mean, very
consistent.
Harsh ratings for us.
It was in only 2022 that government suffered about 11 downgrades from Fitch, Moody's, S&Ps. Downgrades kept hitting us in the face continuously. And at a point where even in RD, I have never seen Ghana in restricted default position before. Like junk. That was in 2022.
And that's why you're putting up a nation that begs. In fact, let's not take the detail out for those who would be watching later this evening at 8:30 p.m. But Mona, your take on what the president has just put out is his beef with the international ratings agencies and how unfair they've been to us. Will the standards change, by the way, if we opt for an African-led ratings agency?
Blessed, I think Isaac has said it all, but coming from a finance background, let me just put one thing out. No matter where you borrow from, okay, the lender will have an economic model, a financial model that they run, and they will look at their credit factors and decide, on what kind of borrower you are and lending to you. Credit agencies who will speak to some of the issues that you as a borrower have in your economic space, and that also helps the lenders in managing the amounts that they give to you. So the credit agencies are a necessary part of the lending business to sovereigns and other corporates. Therefore, we don't only say they are good when they give us a good rating and then get upset with them when they don't. I mean, when I was in office, there were times when they gave us good ratings, sometimes they downgraded us. But what it did was it gave us feedback on what to work on and what to make better in order that we can get better prices for what we borrow, and also how to be debt sustainable and how to best service our debt. So I think that we should take the feedback from credit agencies in good faith rather than the way that it was done. I think you and I both know who the reckless managers have been, and definitely not the credit agencies. Blessed, I want to say one thing now, just in case I'm not able to say much before the end. What is very important for us now? What is our next step? At the end of this 3-year program, we should be at a stage where we know exactly how we want to transform our economy. We need a deep structural transformation of our economy. How do we do this? We need to pivot clearly from being a natural resource supplier into the international market to becoming one that adds value and one that also ensures food security at home, use of what we produce, and sale of what we have in excess to have cash liquidity, which is one of the issues we are having now. As simple as this may sound, it is difficult to implement, and we appreciate that. We've been in office before. The idea is to gain wisdom from counsel. And I think it's time for our managers of the economy to have a consensus from all, like the way we had when we met, we had the meetings in Akosombo and so forth, and invited all of them. And come up with a plan that will take Ghana from the next 3 years, when we are now at ground zero, to the next level of our transformation. We can no longer be the Ghana of 1957. We have to be the Ghana of 2026 or 2027 when we finish this program, so that we can be stronger. The program is always there, the IMF program is always there for us to go to, but we must go stronger this time. It's a pity that this time, different from 2015, we are going so weak. But for me, it does not matter. It is how we rise. So I think that is what is important now. We need to pivot from here and transform into a stronger
As we wrap up, your expectation ahead of A Nation That Begs Part 2, of course, we saw your boss, Seth Tekpe, featuring in that documentary, your expectations. And also, as you wrap up, can we, going forward, sustain our economic recovery in a way that will pull us completely away from running austerity plans in the future?
Yes. I'll answer your last question first. Yes, we can sustain our recovery from 2026-27 onwards with a new economic management team. Definitely not with this one. Yes, heroes to zero. That tells a sad story about Ghana. We've had so many opportunities to do well. You heard Seth and other ministers speak. One of the things Seth talked about was the fact that we had talked about going to the IMF already. This team of economic managers didn't think so. Last minute, they changed their minds and went. That's fine. It's good. what is worrying is how all our financial buffers have been eroded. I mean, we had debt reserve accounts. We had so many accounts set up. The energy sector levy that we were collecting, and it was doing well in paying down debts within the energy sector, was all eroded. It was even collateralized and borrowed against. Where are all those monies? The COVID monies that came in, still not accounted for. I think we need to hold these economic managers, the current ones, accountable, so that even as we go through the program, we'll come out stronger. So I do see that we could come out stronger, able to sustain our debt levels, able to keep our budget deficit low, maybe not at zero, but bring it down and grow the real sector of this economy. Ghana can do well depending on the economic managers that we have.
Okay, so we'll subject that to the 2024 elections, but for now, we're grateful that you're spending some time with us, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's Mona Koche, former Deputy Finance Minister, joining us here on The Pulse. As we wrap up, Isaac, what are we to expect tonight?
Well, so tonight is the part 2 of A Nation That Begs. We've already spoken about it, from hero to zero. So we are telling you how Ghana became that darling boy that President Akufo-Addo was talking about in the Eurobond market, to a point where we had to beg other people to forgive us of our debt. It's a 3-part series. We've already aired part 1, the Genesis. You can go and find it and watch on our social media platform. Tonight, we'll be airing the part 2 at 8:30 a.m. here. PM, on the Joy News channel. And then next week, we'll bring you the final part, which is Painful Haircut, where we speak about Ghana's painful debt restructure, where people actually lost their investment.
Okay, I've got that going on already with the haircuts. Thank you, Isaac Kofi joining us. And you want to make time for A Nation That Begs later tonight on the Joy News channel at 8:30 p.m. Despite government's many promises of ensuring floods do not continue to wreak havoc in flood-prone areas, some persons say they live in fear at the gathering of the rains, because every drop in their vicinity results in flooding, affecting their poverty and health, aside emotional trauma as well. There's more in this latest report by my colleague Hannah Odami.
Another big problem is that of poor drainage in our towns and cities, which leads to flooding during the rainy season. It is time to deal with these long-term problems and find long-lasting solutions, and we're doing just that.
This sound of rain and its accompanying breeze sends many to sleep, snuggling safely and comfortably in a firm textured bed. For others, however, it is an announcement of despair.
Because these days, when it rains just between 2 to 3 hours, then we get afraid.
This has been Irama's fear for years. The gathering of the clouds does not bring she and her family any joy. They rather experience fright, confusion, and palpitation.
It is very painful. I must tell you how I honestly feel about this situation. When it begins to rain around 5 p.m. and continues till around 8 p.m., we all get anxious. We get scared, even to put our heads on our beds. And yet we are helpless because we seem not to have any solution. All we can do is to watch the rains drain into our rooms.
An occupational hygienist, Dr. Roland Srebo, talks about the health hazards associated with the floods and dampness that Irama and others who are in similar situation are susceptible to.
And sometimes after the flood has receded, the damp environment can also promote allergic reaction that can easily promote asthmatic attack. So in effect, these are some of the things that flooding can cause. And let's not forget, malaria is also knocking on our doors after flooding, because after flooding, we realized that there may be stagnant waters within our community, and this can promote the breeding of mosquitoes. And we know the mosquitoes are the vectors of malaria, so by so doing, malaria infection can increase during this time of flooding.
But Tirama, who was born in this house, cannot move out. Her source of livelihood was mainly from renting these 14 separate room apartments to tenants. That is no longer an option because her income has greatly dwindled, with no one accepting to rent a house which gets flooded every time it rains.
Where is that? And I know where 2 rooms with 4.
Look behind me. I have lots of empty rooms which I could have rented, so I would earn some income. But I cannot do so because the rainwaters come in and destroy all the property of tenants. I have 2 rooms with a hall. I have self-contained. I have about 6 single rooms with each having its porch. They are all empty. Imagine how much I would have been earning from these empty rooms if I was renting them out. Yet, all these rooms are locked because of the rain. Recently, someone came to rent this particular one, but the rains destroyed all his things, so he left. It is really depressing, but there's nothing much we can do about it.
Irama is concerned about the hazardous impacts of the floods on her children and grandchildren, the mental torture, the inconvenience, and the health implications.
Just see these holes in the walls. We created them so that the rainwaters which enters our rooms can seep out through them. By the time I finish that work, I would be so tired. Sometimes, even after 3 days, we will still be collecting rainwater from our rooms. The rain seeps down into the ground, so each time we collect water on the surface, the ones beneath the ground then comes up. We keep collecting, so we don't see water anymore.
Acknowledging that not all of Irama's concerns will be immediately addressed, Dr. Srebo believes some of these measures put in place can at least mitigate the impact of the floods on their health.
We need to leave our compound greened. Why am I saying that? Because it's a fashion now for people to concrete their compound. By so doing, the water does not get space to drain or go into the soil. When the compounds are green and left nicely green, when it rains, some of the water will sink down and it may prevent a lot of them going. Because when we concrete our houses, our homes, it means that the water that's coming from our home is going to add up to other persons' own, and at the end of the day, that is what can result in a flood. And we should also try as much as possible not to build on waterway.
From the Kwame Nkrumah Circle, I am Hannah Odame for Joy News.
And I am Blessed Sogam with you here on the Pulse on the Joy News channel. We're taking a break, but when we return, we'll talk about the New Patriotic Party's presidential race, which is heating up. And this afternoon, 2 persons have filed their nomination papers as the race gets heated. We'll get you the details, plus hear from some of our guests who are joining us, rank and file of the party, sharing their thoughts on the reorganization of the governing party. It's coming up here on the Pulse. Please stay with us. And you're welcome back. You're watching the Joy News channel. This is The Pulse. This afternoon, 2 persons have filed their nomination papers as the New Patriotic Party's presidential race heats up. Former Minister for Agriculture, Dr. Efria Koto, and former Energy Minister Boakye Agyarko successfully filed their nominations today to bring to the number 4 of the candidates who have already submitted their forms. Former Trades Industry Minister Alan Kojo is in the race. We have Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who was the second to file last week. And as you may know, 10 persons actually picked up the forms to contest for the flag bearership race of the governing party. But is the Vice President likely to abuse incumbency, as some are already raising? And that's a question that we'll be seeking some answers to later on the show. Earlier, though, of course, one aspirant was turned away by the Elections Committee. That's, of course, the man that we're referring to, who's been in the race for a very, very long time. But it's unfortunate that he's being turned away. We understand a number of the issues with Mr. Preko's forms are being reformed. So let's get some update briefly before I get in studio with my guest. Samuel Mbura is at the headquarters of the New Patriotic Party, joining us right now. Sami, what transpired earlier today, and what can you report about this ongoing filing of nominations, and why was Mr. Preko turned away?
All right, so today we've had 3 aspirants filing their nominations. They include the former Energy Minister, Boakye Agyarko. We also had the former Minister for Food and Agriculture, Dr. Efria Koto, coming with his team to file the nomination. And then the third person being Dr. Konedu Apreko, whom we know is going for his the third term in this presidential race in the governing New Patriotic Party. Initially, he was actually the first person to arrive at the party office to file his nomination, but his forms were not complete. So the Elections Committee requested that he goes back to get all those documents intact and then return and resubmit. So he has successfully done that, and he has gone through the entire process. I engaged him just a couple of minutes ago to find out what actually transpired, and he said, there was a missing document that they requested that he attaches to the form in which he has done. It wasn't anything serious. So, Blessed, as we speak now, we have 3 filing nominations today, whom I mentioned earlier, but in total, we have 5 of them. We know the former Trades and Industry Minister, Kojo Alanchemanten, was the first person to file his nomination, followed by the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, and the third person being Dr. Koto Efria, followed by the former Energy Minister, Boakye Agyarko, and the 5th one being Dr. Konedu Apreko. So there are now 5 who have successfully filed their nomination, remaining 6. I'm told 11 actually picked the forms to contest the MPP presidential race. So at the moment, the party office is back to normal because all the supporters have dispersed, and the election committee too is also wrapping up its work to close for the day. We are not expecting any aspirants to come and file nomination today.
Okay, Sami, I was about asking about the total number that picked up the forms, 10 in all. But yes, 11 as we're picking up. But now you only have 5. Do we have any indication as to whether or not the rest will also pick up? Because that will have an implication, a constitutional implication for the NPP.
Yeah, so what it means is that per the conventions, the electoral conventions of the party, if the candidates exceed 5, that's where they'll have the superdelegates conference. So for now, we have 5, leaving 6. So meaning even if one person comes to file the nomination, then the superdelegates conference will definitely come off. So at the moment, we can't tell if the remaining 6 will file their nominations or not, though they have picked forms. I engaged the Director of Elections, Evans Nemako, earlier to find out from him whether they have gotten indication from the remaining whether they will come to file or not. He says they've not gotten that. But the nominations are still opened till the 24th of June. So, blessed, we have about a week to go, and we are still pitching camp to see how the developments will go.
We are your election headquarters, and we'll keep monitoring the nominations as they unfold. But for now, 5 in all. Samuel Mbua, my colleague, joining us from the headquarters of the NPP. And in fact, one man was there when his candidate or preferred candidate filed the nominations. I'm talking about Honorable Kenwood Noah. So it's the former Volta Regional Chair of the New Patriotic Party, rooting for Dr. Akuto Afriyie. Thank you for joining us. We'll be coming to you shortly. Professor Seidu Alidu is the head of the Political Science Department at the University of Ghana, joining the conversation. And, of course, we'll be going on as we have more rank and file of the party joining us. But thank you, sir, for spending some time with us again. Initially, you were not done with the process, so you were not too confident at that time that your candidate or your preferred candidate will go through. Now, he succeeded with the nominations. So how does that make you feel that he's part of the first 5 to have done that?
Yeah, that is very encouraging and refreshing too, because the requirements are a bit stringent, and having, fulfilled all the requirements, that alone is encouraging. Give us hope.
Hope, you say. But you've seen the names so far.
Yeah.
There is Alan Chermatin, who's been long waiting in the line to become president. Then we have also the vice president, for instance, joining the race. You saw the crowd, the mammoth gathering.
That is the numbers game.
Yes, the numbers game, indeed. Yeah. That should scare you to say, I won't follow Dr. Afriyie anymore. I'll just
join. The race
join,
is neither for the swift nor the strong. At this stage, we are looking at targets.
Okay.
And that target is the delegates. We haven't gotten to the multipliers yet.
No,
we shall be getting
but
to
you
those
saw the
numbers.
You saw the numbers at the headquarters.
Are not, for us, the veterans, it is not scary.
Really?
Of course, yes. Because if you bring 1,000 people and not even one of them have would cast a vote, right. We are not scared by that. We'll get to the numbers, when the time is due. In the fullness of times, we'll be talking about numbers. For now, our target is the delegates. And our delegates, we know their characteristics. They are not even people who will come in the open to, shout for you when you are just...
So nothing to worry about?
We are not worried about that.
Just look at the names that were around when, of course, the vice president decided to pick up his phone. And no need, I'm not fixated on him because of any particular reason, but because of the fact that you're saying, well, these are some of the people who don't even have a voting right. But the MPs have a voting right. For instance, we had about 120 MPs have declared support for the vice president. So the numbers are there, isn't it?
They form just a fraction of those who are going to cast their votes. And we have seen all of that in the past. And it's not about the first time, we are seeing people being whipped into line, to do the kind of things we are saying. We are saying the decision lies with the delegates. And at this stage, we are talking about the special electoral college that will determine. Of course, I'm confident and hopeful that there's other big names that have not even filed yet. I haven't seen, a number.
But the biggest is the vice president. You agree?
That couldn't be the biggest. And if you are looking at it in terms of the numbers that they have, marshaled for the filing, that is not a big deal. Today, we were going to file on the quiet. But there were supporters, people who have the votes, who defied the early morning downpour to be present at the party headquarters on their own volition. Not even a single Uber or taxi was placed at the disposal of anybody. But you saw the trunk of, crowd that came to meet, doctors filing of nominations today. It was huge. We less, thought that could happen on people's own volition. More constituency chairmen, particularly from Greater Accra and nearby, constituencies, came to greet us in spite of the early morning downpour. That is indicative, and these are the people who have the votes. And those are the people we are counting at this stage.
Not the crowd.
Not the crowds in the streets,
Well, I understand that Dr. Kabiru Mahama, who's a technical advisor at the Office of the Vice President, is also joining the conversation. Dr. Mahama, you've heard the point. There are more and more people joining the race now. It's now 5. Are you still confident that that crowd you brought to the headquarters is an indication that your candidate is the best out of the names we're hearing of? Dr. Mahama, you'd have to unmute so we can hear the point you're making.
Yeah, so good afternoon, and good afternoon to my colleague in your studio from the camp of Dr. Akoto. Like I mentioned, the Vice President is a Democrat, in fact, a liberal Democrat for that matter. He believes in competition, and before he even filed, his view is that 10 other people are going to file with him. If at the end of the day we don't get the 10 other people filing with him, the better. However, the number of people filing is not something that worries the Vice President. He's focused on the campaign, and he's been on the tour after the submission, and that has not changed anything. The confidence that we will win the election is still intact.
But then now you see the caliber of people who are joining. For instance, Dr. Koto-Afriyie, who was then the Minister for Agriculture. He was also serving on the economic management team. Don't forget that the Vice President lauded so much, indicating that the party has the men. If you have such an individual joining the race, that will be a force to contend with, isn't it?
The confidence of the Vice President or the team in the camp of the Vice President is not dependent on any one of single of them, because we have sized all of them. We know what they are capable of. We know their support base. The Vice President understands his support base as well. So their participation in the race is not something that scares us. Dr. Akoto is a man who has served the government well. He has served party well, and being part of the contest only makes it good. But that is not to say that Vice President team or campaign team would be shivering because we have the person of Dr. Akoto joining the race, or Alan Chairman, or for that matter, any other person.
I see. So there you have Dr. Kabir Mahama pointing out that, well, it's a good name, but they're not shivering at all. So what difference will Dr. Afriyie make in this race? Have you done some research? Because he was pointing out to the surveys as being fake, I recall.
We have looked at the caliber of persons who actually signed our nomination forms. We have increased crossing this country, but several last week. And when we picked our form last 3 weeks, we didn't just bus people to Accra to come and fill the forms. We went to all the 16 regions of this country, and the enthusiasm, the number of people who have been offering to be part of Dr. Koto's campaign, the number of people who have offered to sign his nomination forms, but we could pick only 10 from a region. That is assuring, that is refreshing. The fact remains that we are working with targets. We know those who constitute the special, electoral college, and we have the numbers. That is what is giving us the confidence, and not the numbers in the streets.
And when you say that, it's still okay. It's a rhetoric. You're just putting that out there. There's no figure, no science to back it. I'm sure you've been carrying out your own scientific research, because Dr. Afriyie was pointing to the fact that the ones that are already out are not.
No, you have seen the controversy.
Are not scientific. Yes,
people.
That's why I'm.
We have a research faculty in the University of Ghana. Is there anything called research faculty in the University of Ghana?
The university. It's not yet out in its official position. I get that. But what's your research telling you?
Our research is telling us that we have the numbers.
Yeah, but you have the numbers. Are you sure you'd win?
Very. Because our strategy is to surprise the party at the special delegate conference, and then we will erupt. Then the numbers games will begin. We can bus thousands of people to Accra today, but that is not our target for now, because there's a danger in that one, and that is not what we want to do.
And the danger is?
The danger is when you continue to deceive yourself. That you have the numbers, and at the stage at which we are, it is not about everybody, but those who have the special casting, the special right to cast the vote as delegates. That is what we are looking at for now. It portrays danger for the party itself when we parade people,
And you keep stressing on that point. Is it the case that you have a feeling that some of the candidates have an upper hand in terms of incumbency advantage? Do you also share
there is no.
Are some candidates advantaged more
people definitely always take advantage of their offices and the incumbency, whatever you want to call it. somebody was complaining the other time about the fact that the rally was held at the party. I don't see anything wrong with that. Right. Because today, after filing, we took advantage of the party's conference room to address the media. Right. We have done so. We are not scared, but everybody has his own approach to, the campaign. The strategies differ. That is the point. The strategies differ. We are working with targets. This is the stage we are. Especially, we are pretty sure that we are going to have more than 5 people. So when we scale through the stage 1, okay, where we are sure to be among at least the first 2 or first 3, then we will erupt from there.
So you're not confident of being number 1, at least first 2. That's your target.
That is the scientific thing. We want to be very scientific. We are being very scientific.
And the first will be the vice president?
The vice president, first or second. We could be first,
and then your candidate counts.
Yes.
So Dr. Akuto may not necessarily win the elections.
Not necessarily. In what terms? There is 2-tier. The psychology of the larger number is different from the psychology of the smaller number. And there is a reason why.
All you're seeking for is to cross, first of all, the special
delegates conference with a good showing. Then you can boost people's confidence. Then people can begin to understand that all they have seen in terms of numbers do not matter at this stage. That is the point.
Dr. Kabir Muhammad, the point about the numbers, did you bus all these people there? And, there are questions as to how maybe the vice president is using his office to take advantage of the internal race. Why not have a playing field?
I think that, when Alan Chairman team filed, a number of people followed, no one asked where he got the people from. When the vice president is filing and there was an eruption of the grassroots, there was a massive, the euphoria was so high and people came across the country, even from the diaspora, to support the vice president. People are raising questions. And for me, I understand because if you are in a competition and your rival or your competitor seems to have some advantage by way of numbers, by way of sheer number of MPs who are supporting your rival, you have concerns. But listen, this is a contest. And a contest, a vice president, let's even assume he has decided to pass people to the ground. What prevents other candidates from doing that, So, someone's strategy should not be your concern. How do you also be able to send a signal to the people to know that look, they are in support of you? So,
but are you even sure? Are you even sure these numbers matter to the special delegates conference first of all, and also the larger group of the delegates who will be electing? They would have the voting rights to decide who becomes the leader.
My brother, you'll be a political neophyte to think that 120 parliamentarians supporting you doesn't mean anything. You'll be tickling yourself and be laughing at you at the wrong side of your mouth if you think that members of the diaspora boarding their own ticket, coming all the way, coming to support the process, doesn't mean anything for the contest. You'll be tickling yourself if constituency election, executives, area coordinators, police executives, whom you people interviewed at the ground, then they declare their support for the vice president, you think they don't matter, then you are not in the contest. Okay? So, the numbers matter. The caliber of the numbers matter. The characteristics of the people behind you, they all matter in an election. So, anyone thinking that the numbers don't matter and they are doing targeting, I'm sure that is their own strategy. We don't have any right to question their strategy. But I think
so that strategy doesn't make us new fights. We are not neophytes.
Right.
It is rather a neophyte who will think that at this stage you could bring everybody from the streets, to shout at party headquarters, and that will translate into votes.
Your point is that these people do not
matter at this stage. That is the point. We are not concerned about the numbers anyway. Our camp is not concerned about those numbers. We are not concerned about those numbers. Our strategy is to work towards targets. And when it comes to numbers, we will get there. And we'll see whether we'll be able to mobilize the numbers or not.
Okay, that's why I said that it is their strategy.
Yeah, that's strategy, but not being a neophyte. We are not neophytes. Because only a neophyte to think that because the person is a vice president, he will win. We have had a vice president in a contest before, 2008. There was a vice president in a contest. We have seen people who were whipped into line. We have seen all of those things before.
Dr. Mahama? Dr. Mahama? Okay. Looks like we've lost. Dr. Mahama, are you still there with us?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yes. So we lost you briefly.
The point I'm making is that the vice president filed his nomination. The numbers that came to support the vice president is important. The vice president was mindful of the fact that we have a special delegates conference that will probably come on before the main delegate conference. The vice president coming to file his nomination form with the support of majority of members of the caucus of parliament being behind him. They all matter.
That is his emphasis. That is his emphasis on the MPs.
These are the people who will anyway vote in the special delegate conference. And people are being moderate. It's okay. I mean, when you listen to him, he's basically trying to say that we are praying to be part of the first five, which is okay. You can be, some people will not do anything and still be part of the first five, because at the end of the day, the majority of the voters, I mean, if 3 people work hard and the third person just only put the hand on the track will move anyway.
Okay. So here's the case. Since you're talking about the 5, we know that that's all we have for now. So granted, there won't be any special Congress, but the likelihood of a 6th person joining the race is high. Yeah, 6 or more, right? So if that happens, are you still confident? Would you want the special delegates conference approach? Because many are praying that you avoid that.
Look, the special delegates conference is a constitutional provision, right? I would be happy, and many of the candidates who have filed their nomination would be happy that we don't go to the situation where we'll have a special delegate conference. There are a lot of energies will be expended, a lot of salvados will be thrown, and some people will not be able to contain the momentum, the heat of the campaign, and their words and utterances could jeopardize the whole campaign. So those of us on this side, we believe that, look, we can avoid unnecessary drama, we can avoid unnecessary, internal rivalry if we are able to do our special delegate conference. But that said, if many people are expressing interest, if more than 5 people have expressed interest, Democrats as we are, liberal Democrats as we are, the Constitution provides that.
Okay.
Article 12 of the Constitution states that we must go for a special delegate conference, and we are ready and we are prepared to have that.
Okay then. Thank you for joining us. Yes.
There'll be no winners. Even though there'll be losers, there'll be no winners in the special delegate conference. So that is just to see the numbers. Okay? The main contest is the national one that will take place in November.
I mean, what's your candidate bringing on board, Dr. Efree, for many who do not know about him and how well known he is within the NPP?
Yeah.
What can you say about him?
He's well known within the party itself. Probably he's not made so much noise.
Are you certain about that? Because we hear all the names around.
He's among the candidates. He's the most approachable. He's one person that most party people, serious party people, can relate with. I have accompanied him to several places, including Parliament, last week. Okay? He's approachable and had been doing his work on the quiet. So when the records come out, like we have filed, then the party will have the people.
What's at stake in the party? I'm asking that because many candidates have campaigned to say, okay, I did this for the party. I supported the NPP this way.
His background is okay. Is NPP, is our tradition. His father is one of those founders of our tradition.
Bafo
Akoto.
Right.
Okay? Then beyond that, as an individual, he's been a member of parliament. He's, been a ranking member on the Food and Agriculture Committee of Parliament and all of that. He's been the chairman of the Manifesto Committee of the, that brought us to power. And all of that. He's an agricultural economist, a member of the economic management team. So he has a very strong background. And his vision, his 2-front vision, one is for the party, one is for the nation. The one for the party is to build a strong, vibrant, independent, financially independent party. A party that can stand on its own, whether in government or in opposition.
Okay.
That is
the party's message.
The party's vision. And he's been driven. I mean, that vision has been driven. You know, he's bid for this. Then he thinks that we have the comparative advantage as far as agriculture is concerned. He said that we haven't even scratched
the
surface of the advantages that agriculture holds for this country. If cocoa, being that was brought to this country in somebody's pocket, will have become the mainstay of our economy, then what about other tree crops, something like rubber, that will give us more? Yeah. Okay, we haven't given it the necessary attention. We haven't given it the public resource commitment.
But while you're doing all of this, I hope that as a campaign, you're mindful of the fact that you have an opposition party that had a relatively smoother role in picking their next leader. They are far ahead of you in terms of selecting a candidate. You do not want to drag the process by bringing on board very big names that like Dr. Ekoto, who may have an impact on the elections. That will further delay your chances as a political party to quickly reorganize and get a candidate. Don't you think so?
The farmers in this country identify more with Dr. Ekoto than anybody else. And when you hear all other candidates speak, whether it's the opposition candidate or our party candidates, they will talk about agricultural revolution. But the one who has the background, the right mix, the exposure, the experience, okay, to lead that agricultural revolution is Dr. Ekoto. He has the background. He has the mix.
All right.
The experience. He understands the science and the data as far as agriculture, unlocking our prosperity, and using agriculture to finance our development, our education. Cocoa money brought education to Ghana. So rubber can give us more than cocoa. And all other tree crops that is successfully established, an authority to manage. That is exactly what we are talking about.
All right.
And his investments will soon begin to show.
And we'll see that when the race starts.
Of course.
We're grateful, Chairman Kenwood, for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
On
Once
the
again.
Pulse. Thank you. Well, let's stay on politics because the National Democratic Congress is candidate in the Asin North by-election. James Gyakye-Quayson has described the schedule of hearings into the criminal case against him as a ploy by the executives and also the governing party to intimidate him. On February 12, 2022, the state charged Mr. Quayson with 5 counts of deceit of a public officer, forgery of a passport, and knowingly making a false statutory declaration, perjury and false declaration. The court, presided by Justice Mary Yazu, has announced that the case will be heard on a day-to-day basis beginning Tuesday, June 20. Reacting to the latest twist of events, James Gyakye-Quayson says the development does not scare him.
I said it. Even they want to give me a bedroom in the court, Asin will still wait for me. If they want me to see me in court every hour, which means I can't leave, they should give me a chamber to sleep there. I'm still going to stand strong and tall and fight for my people. So for JM and Mahama and those guys, they all understand. They all understand what I want to do for Asin and what I want to do for Ghana. Why are we frustrating our own kind? Court as our Daffiama
Say 27th.
Dakra yet to a background by a man cocoa, meant over saying. Pull in a yes at the time. How many pan I can find on to Abamano? Need your question to Abamama. Before I start the voting, before I start the voting, the crime leading one vote. And then the chair say, medical to mamma, what I say, or not to man. And ya dear Hammy, almost diet to a background and family court. The court is so quite the whole day now. Some of us have been now the whole day, so I know be not for more you cover cramo. So I say, see a schedule time I'll be 11 to 1. Mafia and Makanopa, me buy Masabe, and that's some buy, me sack 5 communities. You know what I mean? Because they mean a lot to me. Let that not me buy me for 5 communities. Yes. Your question. Vision I'm in Canada me buy 3 years ago no. And one of them true. And nothing can change it. The only time I bet me as someone I seen now people say they are taking their mandate away from me. Omaka say, Papa, I fed the abreo. My job is done. But so long as they stand behind me, I'll never relent. And then the Omopebi in Canada, me call community be bear na 11. We drew I'm surprised I'm a bit draw. Omo buy omo say Oko court yachiwa to Mumba.
And that's a confident James Jachi-Kwesing indicating that he will not be perturbed by the case in court and also affirming that he has a vision for the people of Asin North and once he gets re-elected, that's the plan he will execute after relocating and reintegrating from Canada into the Ghanaian community. Yesterday, the youth of Daboya in the Savannah region poured onto the streets demanding the removal of police personnel deployed there to maintain law and order. The anger follows what they say is the abuse of some 6 persons who were arrested by the police following the violent clashes in the Lukula area earlier this month. Correspondent Isaac Nonya has more and is joining us via Zoom. Thank you, Isaac, for your time. First of all, what specific concerns led to this protest as we know it? Isaac, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about the specific issues that led to this protest. And kindly unmute for me so I can get the point you're saying. We seem not to have Isaac on with us. There's more in this report. And you're welcome back. Last week, joining Sisaja Ibrahim sat with wife of late former Vice President Kwesi Emisawata, Matilda Emisawata, about her newfound love, which is the work of God. She is now a senior member of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship as they prepare to host an international conference here in Accra. Aisha sat with her.
Ghana will be hosting the 2023 version of the World Convention of the Full Gospel Business Men's Fellowship International on July 13. I mean, some 2,500 Christian businessmen and women from all continents of the world are expected to congregate in Ghana for that meeting. We're lucky today to sit with the coordinator of the ladies' wing of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship, and she's no other person than Mrs. Matilda Emisawata. I'm glad to sit with you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
And what have you been up to?
I've been in my corner, minding my own business, writing books and editing books, and training authors.
So you are the national coordinator of the ladies' wing of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International. What are ladies doing in a men's fellowship?
Yes, the ladies in the fellowship are called Ladies of the Fellowship.
Okay.
So I'm the national coordinator of the Ladies of the Fellowship Ghana.
Okay.
Full Gospel is predominantly a men's organization, as was given to the founder.
Okay.
Let me just put it in perspective for you. An Armenian American dairy farmer had a vision where God asked him to form a fellowship.
Okay.
Based on the fact that a lot of men would rather drop their families at church and not go to church.
Okay.
And go and sit in either hotels and drink or play golf, and then after the church service, go and pick their families. So in the vision, God told Demos Shakarian to find these men and let them congregate where they go, the hotels, and talk about themselves and talk about God, so that what they miss out from the church, they would gain.
Okay.
So that is the genesis of Full Gospel. So it was predominantly to men, and that is how Demos started this. But along the line, the men were coming with their wives, just not to as members, but the wives would tag along, and then the wives would serve the tea and the coffee and whatnot. Gradually, other women who were not spouses of the men who went to Full Gospel also find their way there. So in 2012, the international office decided that something had to be done. And so the ladies of the fellowship was formed. And in Ghana, in 2013, it was inaugurated. So just briefly to give you a background.
Oh, wow, interesting. So the women, how would you describe this one? Is it different from what we've come to know as Women Aglow? How different is this one?
Women Aglow is a women's fellowship.
Okay.
Whereas Full Gospel is a men's fellowship. Men meeting, sharing their testimonies, ordinary men, doctors, lawyers, plumbers, teachers, tailors, teachers meeting, talking about what God has done for them. So that means that in Full Gospel, you must be gainfully employed to be a member.
Yeah. Okay.
You must also be a Christian. However, if you're not a Christian and you find your way there, one of the things that will happen to you is you'll be helped to come to the saving knowledge of God.
Okay.
So men meet and talk about themselves, and the women are part of the men. We work on chapter basis.
Okay.
So for example, in Ghana, we have chapters all over Ghana. I belong to the East Legon chapter, and the chapter has men and women. So men hold positions. Women are not elected to positions, but women can be appointed. So for example, I was appointed national coordinator of the Ladies of the Fellowship, but I cannot become a chapter president. Yeah. So we, together with the men, meet once a week. We call it seminar meetings, where we talk about things to do with business, because you know we are businessmen and women. So we have seminar meetings where we talk about different things like careers, we talk about marketing, we talk about finance, we talk about any social thing you can think of. And then we also talk about spiritual things, because one of the things that happens in Full Gospel is when you come, you will be empowered spiritually. For example, if you don't know the gifts that you are endowed with, you will be helped to identify your gifts. And you'll be trained in a way that you can use those gifts effectively for yourself and also to glorify God.
Okay. So let's talk about how effective the ladies have been in this fellowship so far.
With the ladies, there's a national executive. And the national executive, if you like, oversees all the ladies' affairs in the country. Under the national executive, we have various ministries. We have a prison ministry, a schools ministry, we have an orphanage ministry, hospital ministry, maternity ministry, we have a market ministry, we have a publicity section. So, for example, under the schools ministry, every Friday, the team goes to schools to talk to the children about God, morals, and things. We have a prison ministry where they visit the prisons, not just to donate food items and things, but also to engage the warders and the prisoners in talks as to how to change their lives. The maternity ministry also does the same. The hospital ministry also does the same. Okay. So that is nationally what we do. In every region, we have a ladies coordinator, a regional ladies coordinator. And the regions, if you like, mirror what is done national. So that, for example, if we are going to, last month, for example, the prison ministry went to the secondary prison. Instead of people going from Accra to go secondary, the secondary ladies of the fellowship will organize everything, and just a couple of people will go from Accra, and it is done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you then respond to accusations that the fellowship in general, and that means the ladies and the men, have not really done much or have failed in the fight against corruption and immorality in our society?
Are you saying that we are being accused of that?
Yes.
By who?
Well, I mean, because it is one of your core mandates, or one of the things that you champion, people think that you really haven't done much in that direction.
You know, fighting against corruption and things takes different forms. In the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship, we have what we call unashamedly ethical. Okay. Unashamedly ethical is a global movement that anybody can belong to. Okay. Full Gospel, as a fellowship, is a member of Unashamedly Ethical. Okay. And what Unashamedly Ethical stands for is to help people in whatever business you are doing, wherever you are, to be ethical in what you do. Therefore, for example, if you are a contractor and you are a member of Full Gospel and you are also signed on to Unashamedly Ethical, you make an understanding, you make a commitment that in your business you will follow ethical rules and you will do your business ethically and you will not cut any corners. Okay. That, in my view, it's working against corruption and everything.
And I catch a full playback of that interaction with the former wife of the former vice president, the late Pakwesi Amy Southah, on all of our social media handles and also here on the Joy News channel. But just before we wrap up, we're still in that lead up to the National Science and Maths Quiz. The regionals are already underway because some senior high schools in the Upper East region are gearing up to stamp their presence in the 2023 National Science and Maths Quiz Championship. Will definitely be watching this space and bring you some updates. But that's all we have for you here on The Pulse. I am Blessed, so you can log on to myjoyonline.com. Lots of stories there for you to catch up on. Thanks for watching. Next is Let's Talk Showbiz. Bye-bye.